Konnichiwa minasan, and welcome to the class in the second lecture series on Introduction to Japanese Language and Culture. So, now this is our last week, and as we inch towards the end of the series, I thought it would be a good idea to learn more about Japan. So, I have requested Professor Sudhir Misra from the Department of Civil Engineering, IIT Kanpur, to talk on the approach of Japanese people towards their work. So, some of you I am sure would want to go for higher studies to Japan, some of you would want to work for companies in Japan, some of you would just want to go visit Japan or just be interested in Japanese culture. So, I thought that you might find this discussion interesting. So, let us see what he has to say.
Konnichiwa and namaskar minasan. This is Sudhir Misra and I teach here in the Department of Civil Engineering at IIT Kanpur. It is a pleasure to be talking to you about some of my experiences in Japan. And today the talk is not about the language, but it is about sharing my experiences and thought on working in Japan. I worked there for about 7 years, 5 years in one stint, 2 years in another, and I will share with you what I saw, how the work environment in Japan is. So, we will talk about some things that can be related to the Japanese style of management with focus on decision making, how they work, quality control, which is an integral part of the thought process in Japan. And since this discussion is based on personal thought and experience, there is always an element of subjectivity in it. It is like saying that if a foreigner is asked who has been to India for a couple of years, do all Indians celebrate Diwali or Eid or whatever the festival is? Depending on what kind of an experience he has had in India, he will answer the question one way or another. And that foreigner to whom he tells this story comes back to India, asks another Indian that, well, I have learned this about India. That fellow may or may not agree with that. So, the moral of the story is that what I am going to tell you is a matter of personal experience. Maybe the Japanese, if you ask a Japanese, they agree with it, they may not agree with it. They may say that, well, this indeed used to happen several years ago, but it does not happen any longer. So, all these things are possible. Having said that, let me share some of the thoughts. First of all, let me ask you a question. Do you think Japan is a small country? Obvious question would be that small in what respect and so on, but then let us stick to the question, is Japan a small country? Now, if we look at countries and regions in the world and look at their areas in thousands of square kilometers, Japan surely does not seem to be a very large country compared to China, US, even India. The entire European Union I have put in one place. So, if you look at these numbers, Japan, you can say, is not a very large country. Of course, please verify these details. In this day and age, you should always verify them. There is enough literature available, enough sources available on the internet and so on, where you can check some of these facts and say that, well, this is correct, this is partially correct and so on. So, now to put this area business in perspective, there is some homework for you. Find out some typical distances between major cities in Japan and try to relate this to the distances that you may be familiar with. For example, you can find out the distance between Tokyo and Hiroshima. Find out the distance between Tokyo and Sapporo. Relate these two distances, let us say, to distances that you are more familiar with. Delhi to Hyderabad, Delhi to Calcutta, Bombay, Pune. So, that will give you an idea that, well, whether this 378,000 square kilometers, which is roughly 1/10 the size of India, how does it translate as far as distances involved is concerned? That will also put in perspective for you the actual geography. Japan is an island country and it is fairly long. It is not very wide at places, but the distances are not so small. Having talked about the area, let us talk about another dimension which defines or which has been used to define whether a country is big or small, and that is population. So, if you look at the population distribution, you can say that well, in India it is about 135 crores, China is about 141 crores, Japan is 12 crores, US is 33, the European Union is 44. So, here too Japan is 12 crores and that is about 1/10 the size of India by way of population. Once again verify this and try to find out the population of the major cities in Japan. So, first of all you will have to know what the major cities are, maybe Tokyo, Osaka, Hiroshima, Sapporo, Nagoya, Nagasaki and so on. So, then you will be able to relate that what is the size of these cities in terms of population, in terms of areas, and you will be confronted with the question as an Indian would be if we were asked, okay, what is the population of Delhi or what is the population of Mumbai? Now, one can say that well, we are talking of municipal limits, that is one population, but in both these cases in Delhi there is the NCR region. So, there are regions around Delhi which by and large can be taken to be a part of Delhi in certain contexts. For example, the population, for example, the number of people who work in Delhi and so on. So, the same questions or the same issues will confront you when you are talking about the population in let us say Tokyo. So, there is a Tokyo metropolitan area, there are areas around Tokyo, Chiba, Yokohama, parts of Saitama, where the population lives there, yes, by the way of postal address, but they work in Tokyo. So, now if I combine these two parameters, that is the area in square kilometers here and population in thousands or whatever we have talked about just now, we come up with the measure of population density. How many people are living in a square kilometer in that country? Now, if you look at it that way, this number and this number is pretty close. That is to say that Japan by population density is not a small country compared to India. It is about 1/10 the size in area and about 1/10 the size in population, and that is why the population densities are more or less the same. So, one has to understand that there are different ways of looking at whether a country is small or large, and population density is one of them. So, this discussion here puts a part of our narrative in perspective. Having said that, now let us go to some homeworks. Figure out the volume of import and export of Japan. Try to compare these numbers with similar figures of other countries, China, India, US, any country that you want. Find out what is the GDP of Japan and that position in the world. What is the size of the economy of Japan in relation to the economy of different countries? The question basically that we need to answer or we need to learn some lessons about is what has made it possible for Japan to achieve what it has achieved in the area of technology, in the area of economy, with a small area, a relatively small population, but a lot of population density. Go back to some of the books and facts. We will realize that Japan is poor as far as natural resources are concerned, except for the large population and a large coastline. It imports raw materials and exports finished goods. What does that mean? The country has a very well developed manufacturing base and does a huge amount of value addition to the goods. Try to see the amount of import, try to see the amount of export, and what is happening in between is the value addition to those products. Look at it that way for the different regions, different countries in the world, and you will realize this very important thing here, that is what is the amount of value addition going on as far as the manufacturing sector is concerned. It imports raw materials, exports finished goods. That means that is precisely what is value addition. To my mind, one of the biggest secrets in this case is the fact that the relatively large population in Japan is an asset. Now, the question is, how does that population become an asset? And that is the central theme of the Japanese style of management, the Japanese functioning, the Japanese society, and so on and so forth. In their education system, it is drilled into the students. We are a poor country as far as natural resources are concerned, and therefore, we need to work hard to value add to the raw material that we import, so that our goods can sell in the world market. So, moving forward, you can sell your products in the market, the global market, global competition, only when you have an uncompromising attitude towards quality. You have to be able to produce goods and sell goods which are quality products, and if they are quality products, yes, you can ask for a premium price. So, the point basically is quality products. Everyone has to be very, very careful, conscious of producing quality products, no matter what they are producing, what they are doing. It is all a matter of quality, doing it properly, doing it right to the last detail, and getting it right the first time. These are the kind of principles that we hear in a management class. Japanese products are now synonymous with quality. Japan has made huge contributions to the theory and practice of quality control and management. I would request you, those of you who are interested, those of you who are especially working in the industry, to look up the history of quality management in the world, and you will find that a lot of quality related literature developed post Second World War. A lot of things happened in the 1960s, 70s, 80s, and tried to identify how the Japanese have been an integral part. They have been at the forefront of quality control and quality management techniques. Things that come to my mind immediately are the concepts of, let us say, Kaizen or quality circle. These are concepts which are central to the idea of quality control on a industrial shop floor. The Japanese have been at the forefront of some of these concepts. In Japan, whatever limited experience I have with working in Japan, dealing with people who are working in different companies, the companies are always thinking of how an existing product can be improved. They look at a product, whether it is their own product, whether it is a product from a competitor within Japan, outside Japan, and try to see that, okay, this is what the product is. Can we make it better? Now, this business of making better is very interesting. Better could be in what? It could be in terms of safety. That product could become safer to use. That product could become more economical. It could become cheaper. It could become more functional. You have a product which has functionalities 1, 2, and 3. You try to find out whether functionality 4 or a 5 can be added to it without adding to the cost, without compromising the safety, ergonomics, whether the product becomes more ergonomic. Looking at these kind of concepts, looking at these kind of different dimensions of a product, they are always looking to innovate. Now, that is very important to understand, that innovation is at the bottom line of Japanese production. Quality, of course, yes, without compromising quality. And what is quality is a different story altogether. We are not getting into that, at least in this discussion. Excellent innovators in terms of plus alpha. Now, this plus alpha was a very interesting thing which I was told when I started working. My boss told me that, well, everybody does research in concrete, and that is the area in which I really work. But he said that, well, in our research institute, we should try to produce a concrete plus alpha, and this alpha here refers to some of these things. A concrete or a construction method which is better, safer. In this day and age, we could add sustainable, we could add cheaper. We have already talked about it. What can be added to a product? Combine a radio and a cassette player, functionalities to a phone or a watch. So, that is how the Japanese thought process works. And this idea of innovation runs across the company. It is not only the R&D department which will do it, it is even the sales people who will do it, it is the marketing people who will do it, it is the technical people who will do it. They may or may not be given specific targets, yet they will try to improve that. So, one thing that is very important as far as Japanese management or Japanese thought process is concerned in companies is the idea of innovation, the idea of adding something to it, value addition. Now, how does it happen? There we come to management. The Japanese style of management was a big buzzword long ago, and perhaps it still is. The Japanese style of management, as I have seen it, is often bottom up and not top down. Great emphasis on consensus building, involving everyone in the decision making, so that everyone knows exactly what his or her role is in the scheme of things. So, we have a company which runs like this is the company's top and this is the company's middle, let us say, then there is the grassroots operators here who are at the bottom of the ladder. So, innovation happens all over the place. Sometimes the top tells you certain things to do, sometimes you suggest to the top that in this product I would like to do this, why can't we try to do this, get an approval, try to work on it, develop a new product. And in any major decision making, very often different people from here know what their role is, because finally once the OK is received from the top and we have to implement that decision, then everyone really knows that okay, this is what the decision is, because they have all been part of it. It was a pleasure to work with the Japanese people because they were professionals, excellent disciplined team players. So, this team play, that is working together, feeling that you are part of a team, that was what made it different than perhaps working in India. Each player knew what exactly his or her role was in a certain scheme of things, and everyone knew the larger picture as well. In top down decision making or in top down decision implementation, very often people at the bottom do not know the overall picture, and that makes it difficult to implement the entire decision. Bits and pieces of it get implemented, bits and pieces do not, they lag behind and so on. As part of decision making, as part of doing something new, meticulous plans are drawn up with different contingencies. These plans are endlessly debated and options considered. In other words, the decision making takes time, but implementation is very smooth. So, there is a stage of decision making and there is the stage of implementation. So, if everyone in the decision making process has been involved, they know how the larger picture has emerged, what their role will be, what their boss's role will be, and what is the boss's role going to be, then the implementation is much easier, it is much smoother. In fact, this discussion or this approach towards work helps align the employees' personal objectives with the company's objectives, and that is something which is very, very important in order to achieve a good work ethic within a corporate organization. We always talk of this in management, that an organization would be good, it would be successful if the employees felt a part of the team and their own personal objectives in terms of growth, in terms of promotion and so on, that was aligned with the objectives and growth of the company. And that is something which probably in Japan is easier to achieve, or it has been achieved to some extent. One of the preconditions for this kind of a thought process, however, is long term employment. Things have changed in Japan, but in principle the Japanese companies and the Japanese employees had long term commitment towards each other. it was not very easy and it was not very common for people to change jobs, especially without the employer's consent. There would be some cases where people would change jobs, but that would be for very special reasons, without severing the relationship with the previous company and so on. Things have changed in Japan, but then that is the original thought process, that is the original thinking, and that is part of the ethos in working in Japan. Efforts are made to ensure that all employees feel equal. Of course, there is a situation where the boss has a higher salary than the person who is working with him or his subordinate, but they feel part of the same team, and that is something which gives rise to the typical Sarariman or the Kaishain. In fact, if you ask in Japan, a lot of people would say that they all belong to the middle class. The people who respond that they belong to the middle class in Japan is probably larger than any other part in the world. That is because all of them feel that they are all in the same boat. So, that is what is important, that is what is interesting to be working in Japan. Now, let me come to a small summary of some of the points that we have been talking about. What makes the Japanese style of management click? Teamwork. In fact, for teamwork, I am reminded of a Japanese proverb which says, Deru kui ga utareru. I do not know whether you have done this proverb in this class or not. Deru kui ga utareru. Deru kui ga utareru. Kui is a pile. So, what we are talking about is, in civil engineering construction, there are lots of these piles, let us say, and they are all supposed to be here, so that something else can be built on this. Now, if there is a situation that this pile extends beyond where it should be, then we need to hammer this pile down to become uniform. Now, that is precisely what the proverb is, ki deru kui ga utareru. A kui or a pile that is protruding, detemas, is protruding, will be hammered down. Now, we can interpret this proverb any which way we want, but in principle to me it means that it is not very expected that somebody would try to stand out in a Japanese team, even though everybody would know what their role is, maybe even the leadership role, but that does not mean that the leader will stand out. Everybody recognizes the leader, but at the same time the leader thinks and the people also think that they are all part of the same team. So, teamwork is possibly one of the key elements of Japanese work ethic. Hard work, pride in their work, they are very proud of the work they are doing, no matter what work it is. Commitment to that work, commitment to the company, loyalty, that is what we talked about, long term commitment, long term employment. Only when there is long term employment and long term commitment both on part of the employee and the employer, there will be the issue of investment from the employer in developing the employee, training the employee in an appropriate manner. Dignity of labor, everybody does what is required to be done without any shame, without any thought that this is not my job, this is below my dignity to do this job. Respecting the skills. Manufacturing, engineering are skill based professions. You need welders, you need people on the assembly line who may or may not be very highly educated, they may not have the highest degrees, but they will be highly skillful, they need to be highly skillful. That has to be respected not only from the point of view of salary, but also by way of social recognition. So, that is the part of the Japanese management. There are so many other things that we can talk about, but I think in a very small bird's eye view of what I learned from Japan is some of these things. What I saw in Japan was some of these things. If we are able to learn some of these things, imbibe them in our own work ethic, I am sure there can be wonders. With this, we come to an end of our discussion today. どうもありがとうございます。 Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure to be talking to you on different aspects, sharing my experience with you, and I wish you all the very best. Thank you once again.